At this point, it's basically virtually a tradition, like a rite of presidential passage, that every new administration starts bombing Yemen, the Houthis in Yemen. There was bombing by the Bush administration in a limited way as part of the war on terror in Yemen. President Obama escalated it significantly. He escalated the bombing of alleged terror targets through drones and often attacked the Houthis in Yemen, but he also worked with Saudi Arabia, which waged full all-out war against the Houthis in Yemen. They regarded them as a arm or an extension of Iranian power, a proxy of Iran, and therefore Saudi Arabia and their competition with Iran viewed the Houthis controlling Yemen as their enemy. And the Obama administration worked with the Saudis, provided them with all kinds of weapons, provided them with intelligence about where to strike. And the Saudis waged a barbaric war against the Houthis in Yemen, creating what all human rights groups recognize was the worst humanitarian crisis on the planet. Yemen is the poorest country in the world. And the war that Saudi Arabia, with the help of the Obama administration, brought to Yemen made all of those humanitarian challenges much, much worse, including mass starvation throughout Yemen. In the first Trump presidency, there was bombing of the Houthis in Yemen. And then when President Biden got into office, he said he was going to work with Saudi Arabia to stop the war in Yemen. But after October 7th, when the Houthis began attacking ships in protest of the Israeli destruction of Gaza, Biden ordered continuous bombing. There were months where there was bombing essentially every day throughout 2024. Just constant, never-ending bombing. Biden ended up dropping 1,000 bombs on Yemen in 2024 alone. And European allies dropped a large number as well in conjunction with the United States. So the United States has been bombing Yemen, bombing the Houthis for a long, long time. And the Houthis are probably stronger than they've ever been. The capabilities that they've developed, including being able to shoot long-range missiles into Israel, which they've done several times. The success they've had in attacking and seizing ships is, their strength is higher than ever, despite all of that bombing, all of that constant warfare that the United States has been waging in various forms in Yemen, going back to the Bush administration. And this is something that President Trump criticized Joe Biden for doing during the campaign. He said, why is the United States bombing Yemen? That's not the way that you handle things. And yet, not even 2 months into office, Trump has restarted and seemingly escalated one of the several different wars we have in the Middle East. Here from the New York Times on March 15, Trump orders attacks on militant sites in Yemen and issues a warning to Iran. Quote, it was the opening salvo in what senior American officials said was a new offensive against the militants and a strong message to Iran as Mr. Trump seeks a nuclear deal with its government. Air and naval strikes ordered by Mr. Trump hit radars, air defenses, and missile and drone systems in an effort to open international shipping lanes in the Red Sea that the Houthis have disrupted for months with their own attacks. At least one senior Houthi commander was targeted. U.S. officials said the bombardment, the most significant military action in Mr. Trump's second term so far, was also meant to send a warning signal to Iran. Mr. Trump wants to broker a deal with Iran to prevent it from acquiring a nuclear weapon, but has left open the possibility of military action if the Iranians rebuff negotiations. Now, we have seen from Trump that he uses threats of war against other countries in order to achieve the objective of avoiding war. His theory is that the country has to fear that the United States will attack them or bomb them in order to get them meaningfully at the negotiating table to make concessions. But when it comes to Iran, a country that Israel has been pushing the United States to attack and bomb for 15 years, you can go back 15 years, and hear Netanyahu warning that Iran was on the verge of getting a nuclear weapon, that it's the United States' responsibility to go in and attack it. The Israelis did in fact bomb Iran after Iranians sent ballistic missiles into Israel, which was in turn a response to the Israeli bombing of Iran's consulate in Damascus and other acts as well. So there has been a kind of dangerous conflict militarily between Israel and Iran. Israel considers Iran to be its most significant threat and enemy. And they've been wanting the United States to go fight that war for them or with them. Netanyahu urged the United States to go invade Iraq and get rid of Saddam Hussein, who he also considered to be one of the worst enemies of Israel. He did the same in the Obama administration, urging the United States to go launch a dirty war against Bashar al-Assad. And when it finally succeeded later last year, Netanyahu stood up and took credit for it. So there's a lot of wars that have benefited Israel that the Netanyahu government, the Israelis, have wanted the United States to go and fight for them or with them. And Iran has always been the kind of North Star, the ultimate prize in getting the United States to go and wage war on. And although I do believe that Trump's real goal is to get a nuclear deal with Iran that we had with Iran, but Trump had judged it to be a poor deal and therefore withdrew from it. When you're bombing very aggressively the Houthis, with whom Iran has a relationship, and at the same time threatening Iran that you're going to bomb them if they don't stop working with the Houthis, which they're never going to do, you're flirting with a real war that could blow up the entire Middle East. After a campaign that Donald Trump ran twice now, 3 times really, pledging to keep the United States out of Middle East wars, and specifically condemning Biden for bombing Yemen. Here's what Trump posted on Truth Social today. Quote, this was yesterday actually. Today I have ordered the United States military to launch decisive and powerful military action against the Houthi terrorists in Yemen. They have waged an unrelenting campaign of piracy, violence, and terrorism against American and other ships, aircrafts, and drones. To all Houthi terrorists, your time is up and your actions must stop starting today. If they don't, hell will rain down upon you like nothing you have ever seen before. Similar language to what he used when he was threatening Gaza and Hamas. To Iran, support for the Houthi terrorists must end immediately. Do not threaten the American people, their president, who has received one of the largest mandates in presidential history, or worldwide shipping lanes. If you do, beware, because America will hold you fully accountable and we won't be nice about it. The Pentagon released footage of some of the U.S. strikes on Yemen. You can see some of them here. That's a pretty heavy and destructive bomb. The Yemenis claim that at least 32 civilians were killed in these strikes. The Houthis have made that claim, and there's hospitals and the like that have supported that. Here is Donald Trump in June of 2023 in an interview with Newsmax describing what he wants to be as president. Actually, this isn't an interview with Newsmax, but it's Newsmax broadcasting a Trump speech from June of 2023.
Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, I will have the horrible war between Russia and Ukraine totally settled. I'll have it done in 24 hours. I say that, and I would do that. That's easy compared to some of the things that I'd get that done in 24 hours. I know them both. As the Bible says, blessed are the peacemakers. See that? I will be your peacemaker. I was your peacemaker.
So I will be your peacemaker. Less than 2 months in office, he's massively bombing the Houthis. And the argument is that the Houthis have been attacking American ships, which was true, because the United States was the country under Biden arming and financing the Israeli destruction of Gaza, which the Houthis were trying to protect. But ever since there's been a ceasefire, those attacks on American ships have stopped. And the Houthis began attacking ships, Israeli flagged ships, and said they would continue to do so, not American ones, in protest of the Israeli blockade of all food and electricity and other humanitarian aid entering Gaza. And they said, we're going to continue to attack until Israel lets the humanitarian aid into Gaza, that the ceasefire deal that they agreed to would be honored. It would have been much easier for Trump to get the Israelis to simply allow the humanitarian aid in to Gaza. Instead, we decided to go and bomb the Houthis in order to shield the right of Israel to block humanitarian aid from entering Gaza. We're back into fighting Middle East wars in defense, really, of Israel, given the current posture of what the Houthis have been doing and are saying. One of the ways that I often defended Trump's foreign policy of the first term was to point out that it was accurate, that Trump was the first president in decades to have not involved the United States in a new war. He inherited some wars from Obama, including bombing campaigns against ISIS in Iraq and Syria, which he escalated as he promised to do. But he didn't involve the United States in any new wars. And Trump himself, in 2024, praised himself for that. Here on Fox News in January of 2024 is what he said made his first term so commendable.
I think he had very little chaos. I think most of the chaos was caused by the Democrats constantly going after me. And remember this. Remember that with phony, Russia, Russia, Russia. I mean, if you look at Ukraine, everything was phony. The FISA warrants, the lying to Congress. They had chaos. They were the ones that caused the chaos. We didn't have chaos. We got the biggest tax cuts in history, the biggest regulation cuts in history. I had no wars. I'm the only president in 72 years. I didn't have any wars. And
I mean, this has been something Trump has been promising and saying and doing. And again, we're bombing Yemen now. We restarted our bombing campaign of Yemen and threatening Iran with bombing campaigns as well. Trump did an interview with Tim Pool in May of 2024. And here's what he had to say about bombing of other countries, including Yemen.
I look at your policies, I see secure the borders, bring jobs back. I look at the Democrats and many Republicans, and it's foreign war and foreign expansion.
That's right.
What is that?
I think it's just a failed mentality. It's crazy. You can solve problems over a telephone. Instead, they start dropping bombs. I see recently they're dropping bombs all over Yemen. You don't have to do that. You can talk in such a way where they respect you and they listen to you. Viktor Orban of Hungary, you know, the leader, they call him a strong man. Who cares if he's a strong man or not a strong man? He's a very powerful guy. He said the problem the world has is that Donald Trump is no longer president. When he was president, China didn't play around, Russia didn't play around, nobody played around.
Why do we have to bomb Yemen? Asked Trump when Biden was doing it, with the same justifications. The Biden administration massively bombed the Houthis based on the rationale that they were attacking American ships. The difference is that under Biden, they were attacking American ships. But as I said, once there was a ceasefire in Gaza that Trump deserves credit for having facilitated, the Houthis actually stopped and only began attacking Israeli ships based on their grievance that the Israelis were not letting in humanitarian aid into Gaza as they promised they would. Here from the New York Times yesterday, quote, the Houthi rebels who control most of northern Yemen had temporarily halted attacks in the Red Sea when a ceasefire took effect in Gaza in January. But last week they said they would target any Israeli ships, violating their ban on Israeli vessels passing through the Red Sea, the Arabian Sea, and the Gulf of Aden. In other words, they were threatening Israel ships. They were saying, we're not going to attack the United States anymore. We're not going to attack American ships. We're going to attack Israeli ships. And the reason we're doing that is because the Israelis won't allow humanitarian aid, food, into Gaza. Or electricity, so there's no clean drinking water. And instead of demanding that the Israelis abide by the ceasefire that Trump himself facilitated, he decides to send over our service members, our military planes and jets, and put them in harm's way to bomb the Houthis instead of getting the Israelis to simply abide by the ceasefire and let that humanitarian aid in. As I said, we've been bombing Yemen for more than a decade. Here's the Council on Foreign Relations in September of 2015. The title is Obama's War of Choice. supporting the Saudi-led air war in Yemen. Quote, 6 months ago today, the White House announced U.S. support for the Saudi-led military intervention in Yemen via press release. Quote, President Obama has authorized the provision of logistical and intelligence support to the Gulf Cooperation Council-led military operations. As is true for all interventions, U.S. officials offered a buffet of justifications and objectives for backing the GCC side in Yemen's chaotic civil war. Since March 25th, the United States has been providing in-air refueling, combat search and rescue support, including the rescue of 2 Saudi pilots whose helicopter crashed in the Gulf of Aden, detailing 45 intelligence analysts to help advise on target selection, and redoubling weapons exports and contractor support to GCC countries. Indeed, Saudi Arabia's relationship with the United States is primarily as a source of cash for weapons. Since October 2010 alone, the Obama administration has agreed to sell $90.4 billion in weapons to the Gulf Kingdom. The President Obama would so enthusiastically endorse arming such a brutal authoritarian government is unsurprising, since the United States is by far the leading arms dealer with 47% of the world total to what an annual State Department report classifies as the world's, quote, least democratically governed states. Those in the lowest quintile based on Freedom House's political rights ranking and the World Bank's Voice and Accountability score. This is why I go crazy when people try and claim that U.S. foreign policy is about spreading democracy and combating authoritarianism and tyranny, when we prop up and arm and fund many of the governments, the world's most savage dictators. But that was back in 2015 when the United States was helping Saudi Arabia wage all-out war on the Houthis. And as I said, that war resulted in humanitarian catastrophe. So much so that BBC reported in October of 2016, just as Obama was out the door, quote, Yemen conflict, U.S. could, quote, be implicated in war crimes. The U.S. government is concerned it could be implicated in potential war crimes in Yemen because of its support for a Saudi-led coalition air campaign. Official documents obtained by Reuters news agency, externals show government lawyers advise the U.S. it might be considered a co-belligerent under international law. The Obama administration has continued to authorize weapons sales to Saudi Arabia despite the warnings last year. On Saturday, an airstrike on a funeral hall in Sana'a killed some 140 people. U.S. President Barack Obama agreed to provide, quote, logistical and intelligence support to the coalition after it intervened in the conflict between forces loyal to Yemen's internationally recognized government and those allied to the rebel Houthi movement in March 2015. Since then, more than 4,125 civilians have been killed and 7,200 injured, the UN says, with airstrikes believed to have caused about 60% of the deaths. As I said, Biden bombed the crap out of Yemen continuously throughout 2024. And when he started, the New Republic in January 2024 noted this, quote, Biden's airstrikes on Yemen draw outrage from Democrats and Republicans alike. Lawmakers you would never expect are joining forces after Biden's bombing of Yemen. And one of the points it made was that Congressman Ro Khanna of California said Biden's bombing of Yemen with no congressional approval is unconstitutional, and Congressman Matt Gaetz quote tweeted Congressman Khanna's statement and said, I agree completely, or something along those lines. So the argument was when Biden started bombing Yemen with no declaration of war from Congress, no authorization from Congress, it was unconstitutional. And now Trump is doing the same thing. Here's Justin Amash, the former Republican congressman from Michigan, who turned independent, was a libertarian. He said on December 21st, 2024, when Biden was still president, quote, I'll say it again, it is unconstitutional for President Biden to engage in acts of war in Yemen. It doesn't matter how appropriate you think it is for the U.S. to take on Houthis or terrorists or anyone. Congress has not authorized war in Yemen. Engaging in war there is thus unlawful. This was back in January of 2024 when the strikes that Biden ordered on Yemen started. It went all throughout 2024. Just to give you a sense of this, here from October of 2024 is a U.S. State Department of Defense release where they boast, quote, U.S. strikes underground targets in Yemen. Last Wednesday evening, the Pentagon announced that the United States had deployed B-2 Spirit bombers to the Middle East to destroy targets in Yemen. The target strikes, controlled by the Houthis, were buried deep underground, said the Pentagon press secretary during a briefing today. And then the New York Times reported in October of 2024, U.S. stealth bombers attack Houthi weapons cache in Yemen. Air Force B-2 bombers struck 5 underground weapons facilities in what may be a signal from the Biden administration to Iran. There have been Pentagon war games about what would happen if we actually did strike Iran. Tucker Carlson noted this today, that one of the things Iran would do is they have forces throughout the region, and at long range they could attack U.S. military bases that the U.S. still has in the Middle East, in Syria, in Iraq, in other places throughout the Middle East, including in sea, and that there could be a lot of service members who die. This is yet another war that the United States is fighting without really any direct interest in doing so, given the posture of the Houthis, that they're only attacking Israeli ships for Israel, primarily to benefit Israel. AIPAC praised President Trump for bombing the Houthis, not because AIPAC cares about the integrity of international shipping lanes, but because they care about Israel primarily. And speaking of caring about Israel primarily, Ben Shapiro of the Daily Wire also celebrated this bombing of the Houthis. Here's what he said.
President Trump, by the way, including Iranian responsibility in here, is really important because the Houthis could not do this without Iran. And once again, I hear people who are caterwauling that this is just President Trump wanting war with Iran. Let's be very clear. There will be no war with Iran. Even if the United States were to facilitate an Israeli strike on Iranian nuclear facilities, Iran does not go to war with the United States, because if they did, we would obliterate them in half a second flat. That is not a thing. All the people who are telling you that there's a false choice between complete passivity in the face of Iranian aggression and total war, boots on the ground in Iran, is lying to you. Full stop. Lying. All caps. Lying, lying to you. The United States is not putting boots on the ground in Iran. That is not a thing. No one wants it. No one. The other plausible notion is that targeted strikes could do an enormous amount of damage to the Iranian regime, so they ought to stop while they are behind. They should stop funding the Houthis. They should stop their nuclear program. The Trump administration is taking precisely the correct angle on all of this. And again, the liars who are telling you that this is designed to lead to war with Iran, please name me the person who wants full-scale, boots on the ground, hundreds of thousands of troops in the Middle East war with Iran. Please name the human. I would love to see you point out the human.
I don't understand Ben Shapiro's definition of war. I don't think he does either. You don't have to have hundreds of thousands of boots on the ground in a country in order to be at war with the country. If you send your Air Force over a country and start bombing it, bombing multiple sites there, that is an act of war. Obviously, the United States would consider that an act of war. If any country did that to the United States, the Iranians would obviously consider that to be an act of war from the United States. It would be an act of war under every international law, under any international body, under any understanding of war that has ever existed in all of human history. So Ben Shapiro's argument, oh, don't worry, we're just going to fight a war, a limited war against Israel's biggest enemy in the Middle East by just dropping bombs on them, but we're not going to send hundreds of thousands of service members, troops into Iran, should offer no assurances at all. Obviously, Iran would treat that as a war and would react accordingly. And the idea is what? They're going to just take it? Even though they have used military force against American targets in the Middle East before as retaliations, because what, we're going to obliterate them with nuclear bombs? We're going to drop nuclear weapons on Israel's main enemy in the Middle East? Once you start talking that way about bombing a major country, and Iran is a major country, it has serious military power, it has 3 times the population of Iraq, it has a population of 75 million people, it's a country with a very rich and proud history and culture and tradition. Obviously, the risk of war in a way that's unpredictable escalates greatly, including actual shooting between troops. But just bombing Iran itself is starting a war against Iran. And Donald Trump has prided himself on the fact that he doesn't start wars. He doesn't want to start wars in the Middle East in particular. We've been too involved in wars in the Middle East. Now, I'm not hitting the panic button about Trump starting a war against Iran because, like I said, this is something that he does. He threatens these things as a negotiating tactic. He said exactly the same thing to Hamas. If you don't release all the hostages immediately, not even in accordance with the plan, we're going to rain down hell on you of the kind you've never seen before. We're going to obliterate you. So far, that hasn't happened. There's a big difference between threatening a war and actually starting one, especially when it comes to Trump. But Trump is escalating his rhetoric against Iran, and at some point it's going to be a question of his own credibility. Here's what he posted today. Let nobody be fooled. The hundreds of attacks being made by Houthi, the sinister mobsters and thugs based in Yemen, who are hated by the Yemeni people, all emanate from and are created by Iran. Any further attack or retaliation by the Houthis will be met with great force. And there is no guarantee that force will stop there. Iran has played, quote, the innocent victim of rogue terrorists from which they've lost control, but they haven't lost control. They're dictating every move, giving them the weapons, supplying them with money and highly sophisticated military equipment and even so-called intelligence. Every shot fired by the Houthis will be looked upon from this point forward as being a shot fired from the weapons and leadership of Iran, and Iran will be held responsible and suffer the consequences, and those consequences will be dire. That's an unmistakable explicit threat to go to war with Iran, even if it doesn't entail the sending of huge numbers of U.S. troops to invade Iranian soil. And again, why? Why is the United States doing that? I know there's so many Trump supporters justifying Trump's bombing of the Houthis in Yemen, even though Trump himself criticized Biden for doing exactly the same thing. And I'd argue Biden had more justification because at the time the Houthis were actually attacking American ships. And now they've said they're limiting their attacks to Israeli ships, meaning that this bombing campaign is seemingly yet again in protection of Israel and not the United States. But to threaten Iran, in what conceivable way is threatening a war with Iran, or worse, engaging in one, consistent in any meaningful sense with the America First ideology, with everything Trump has said about avoiding wars? We're 2 months in to the Trump presidency, not even. And we're already bombing a new country massively with the Houthis. I realize, as I said, we've been bombing the Houthis for a long time under every administration of both parties, but it hadn't stopped. And Trump rejuvenated it in a way that he promises that it will be a sustained campaign while threatening war with Iran. If you watch this show, there's something that you will know, if nothing else, which is that free speech is under attack. It always is. Rumble, though, refuses to back down. Rumble has always believed in empowering voices, no matter how unpopular. And now we're taking that fight to the next level. When major advertisers conspired to pull their dollars, with even brands like Dunkin' Donuts turning their back and refusing to advertise on Rumble, claiming that Rumble had a right-wing culture. But we're not here to fit a mold. We're here to defend free expression. To strengthen this mission, we're excited to offer Rumble Premium, a completely ad-free experience with exclusive benefits for viewers and creators. You'll find exclusive content from creators like Russell Brand and Dr. Disrespect, Tim Cast, and the Mug Club with Steven Crowder. It's more than a subscription. It's a stand for free speech. Your voice matters. Join Rumble Premium for a very limited time. You can get $20 off an annual plan using the promo code RumbleLive. Visit rumble.com/premium and claim your special sale discount today. Together we can turn the tide, whether you join Rumble Premium or simply keep watching Rumble shows. Your support helps keep free speech alive. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.